Hi, this is Paul Sackis, Good News Planet. I'm speaking to Jay Rappaport. We're going to talk about the planet. We're going to talk about a healthy planet. And Jay is a gentleman, actually, who's in the New York Times, talking about these things, are being referred to, and has a lot of good information. So what is the state of the planet, and how can we make it a happier place?
Okay. What I want to talk about is something that I call the universality of environmental market failure. And this is an idea that first occurred to me probably about, well, I hate to say it, but like 30 years ago when I was in college. And I was a sophomore and I was studying economics, and there were a few ideas that came together for me from the introductory classes, actually. And just putting those few ideas together, once you understand them, then you'll understand the principle that I'm trying to discuss here. And really, I've tried to write this down and make it simple and fast. And I can identify three ideas, and if we just build on those ideas one at a time, and then we'll put them all together and we'll arrive at the idea that I'm trying to communicate. So,
Idea number one.
idea number one. Well, the three ideas are the idea, I'm going to use an analogy of a river where there are rocks above the water and below the water. And this is to demonstrate the idea that pricing, there are some things where we can see price and some things that we cannot see price. So the idea of invisible pricing is number one. The second idea is the notion that behavior is proportional to incentives. That when when there's more of an incentive, more of an economic incentive, it tends to stimulate more activity. People become more interested in it because they can smell a buck. It's a basic human nature. And the third idea has to do with market failure. When we talk about market failure, it's a description of the way markets exist, whether they're functioning smoothly, and when markets are smooth, they're said to be operating efficiently. When markets are said to be in failure, we think about this as stock panics or buying manias. You hear about the price of art, escalating beyond any rational level, and people are thinking, what's going on here? Why is a stock going up so much? What is this mania around something? Or by the same token, why is everyone panicking? Why is everyone trying to sell everything all at the same time? And the point that I want to make is these are not, it's not actually a failure in the sense that markets cease to function. They're actually continuous ends, they're ends of a continuous spectrum of market behavior that's already predicted by standard economic theory. So it's nothing unusual. I'm not saying anything that's new. It's just putting together the existing ideas in a way that we can understand the world that we're living in, and the real challenge of building a sustainable economy, so that we're not destroying the planet every day in every manageable way. So the first idea is, I was using the analogy of a river, and if you're looking at rocks above the water, you can see the rocks that are above the water, and if there are rocks that are below the water, you can't see them directly, but you can see the way that the water is disturbed around those rocks. And so that there are rocks are there, but you can't observe them directly. And it's the same way with pricing. In order for something to have a price, there has to be a property right associated with it. And the example that I've used for many years is, if I wanted to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge, you would probably not want to do that. And if I say, look, I'll give you a really good deal, it wouldn't change the argument because I don't have the right to sell that to you. So that's why you can't even consider buying it from me. Well, it's the same way with any type of a good or an item or a thing which we don't recognize ownership over. So when we talk about clean air, for example, or from the other side, if we talk about the ability to pollute the air, so pollution as well as environment in its natural state are both things that we don't recognize as having a price on them. And for this reason, they're invisible to us. We can't see the price, and therefore we're not capable of counting it. So in a typical economic analysis, people try to look at what pricing exists, and then they try to make tallies of it, and they say, well, what's the total sum of goods and services? All of the environment remains invisible to that type of an analysis. And it doesn't mean that those items are any less valuable or any less real, or that we're reacting to them any differently. We just can't see the price, and therefore it's invisible to our perception. So that's the first idea. It's very simple, right?
All right.
Are we good? We're good to go here?
I got that
Okay.
one.
Second one is behavior is proportional to incentive. So if something is free, if there is no price on it, I can't sell it, no one can buy it, it can't hold a price in the marketplace. But that doesn't mean that people don't try to acquire these things. If you go fishing in the ocean, nobody owns a specific fish. So you cast your hook in the water and you see what happens, and you catch one, you'll catch 10. It's great because they're free for the taking. The property right isn't established. But once you've brought that fish on board into your boat, it's yours. And if someone tries to take it, you're going to have a problem. So property is considered, property that has not been defined doesn't have a price. And once someone establishes ownership, then it enters the economic system, and it's able to be bought and sold and traded and so forth. So when something is free, think about what that does to our behavior. Actual examples of this in the marketplace. You get spam email all the time because spam is free. So someone can send out 1 million emails at little or no cost. The cost for the 2 millionth email is the same as the cost for the 3 millionth email. And if 2 or 3 people respond out of 3 million emails, that's a business model. They can make money on that. And the reason they can is because wasting everyone's time is something that they're able to do without having to pay for it. In the same way, just for an example of a issue that's popular now, the idea of taxing carbon. If you put gas in your car, you drive around your car, the exhaust from your car goes into the atmosphere, you're not paying for the carbon that you put into the atmosphere. There's no price on it. We don't recognize that yet. And we also do recognize that it's causing what we call global warming. It's causing temperatures to rise. I think they just reported last week that the ice caps in Antarctica were officially past the point of no return. And what that means is the ice caps melt, the sea level rises, and it's catastrophic flooding that is at this point unavoidable. So those are the events that we recognize because carbon is the most commonly used element that we work with in the economy. It's the fuel that underlies economic activity. It's the dominant primary fuel that we've been using for, since the invention of the internal combustion engine. So the reason that we're able to understand the economic effects of carbon is because it's the dominant material that we're using right now as we pursue economic activity. That has a destabilizing effect in the physical environment, and that's why we're aware of this idea. But carbon is not an exceptional product. Every other element of the environment that has no price and no defined recognition of property right is in exactly the same position as carbon. So we're aware of carbon and we're aware that it's a huge environmental problem, but it's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, because everything else is in exactly the same position. So when things are free, it creates problems in our behavior. Now, a related idea, and I'm just going to mention this if there are any people with interests in economics, there's, just very briefly, there's something called the theory of comparative advantage. And this is a very well recognized theory in economics. And what it enables us to do is to compare relative profitability. How good of a business is one business compared to another business? And it's just a way for us to do a calculation and say, if I'm going to be a business person, which is the business I'd rather be in? And very simply, it's a very simple formula. You can look at it by measuring profitability and dividing that by cost. So if something becomes more profitable and the cost remains the same, that's a better business. If something remains just as profitable, but your costs start to go up, then the profitability of the business starts to go down. Now, if you're in a business and the profit remains constant and the cost goes down to zero, now all of a sudden the profitability starts to look spectacularly good. That's market failure. That is what market failure is. It's when the business looks so great that there's a mania to consume it. And the point that I'm trying to make is that the environment is considered a free good. And in that context, when you just plug those values in as a cost to a business proposition, the idea of exploiting the environment becomes absolutely irresistible. So when you take a look at an item, then you walk into a store and you're thinking about buying a table or a chair or a lamp or a car, what you're seeing is the price tag and you're seeing the item that you have in front of you. But what you're not seeing is all the environmental costs that are incorporated into it. And many of those costs, if not most of those costs, are actually hidden and invisible. We never see the pricing. So when people talk about things like doing a cost-benefit analysis, they're trying to determine costs on one side and they're trying to determine benefits on the other side of this equation. And the belief is that, well, we can tell if one is larger than the other and therefore we can make an intelligent decision. What I'm saying is that the way that we measure costs is not a good way to measure costs, because we're not seeing all of the actual costs associated when we talk about costs. And on the other hand, when we talk about benefits, we're not seeing all of the hidden environmental costs associated with benefits. So we don't know whether the hidden costs are larger or smaller than the costs that are visible by their pricing. And therefore, the cost-benefit analysis is really, it's a questionable approach. We don't really know what it tells us. So I think what it's really pointing to is the idea that we need a more comprehensive way to describe and measure economic activity, that the notion that we can measure our lives and our progress in business just by counting up the costs of things around us, I think in a way that's kind of blind to all of these things that we use and rely on and depend on that we're not actually taking into account. So I hope that covers what I wanted to try to talk about, the universality of environmental market failure. That's what I mean by that. It's that there is a universal market failure over environmental goods which we don't recognize and which we are living in. And there's a principle in geology called erosion. And if you look at the Grand Canyon, it's got to be one of the most spectacular things that you'll ever see if you get the chance to go there or see great pictures of it. But the entire phenomenon can be described by the principle of erosion. And I believe in the same way the progress of human civilization for as long and throughout our entire history as a species can be explained by the universality of environmental market failure. It determines the course of our activities as we work in groups, as we work individually. These are things that we're not aware of that we're doing, but nonetheless, these are the incentives that we respond to. And as we work together by ourselves or in groups or in cooperation, ultimately we are responding to this landscape of incentives that determines our activity. And the last thing I want to say is it's not a stable equilibrium. When there's an incentive that's almost an infinite incentive to consume a resource because it appears to be free, as that resource becomes increasingly scarce, that means the price is likely to continue to be driven higher. As the price goes higher, the incentive becomes increasingly powerful to consume it. And so the logical course of this process that we're describing is that consumption of the resource accelerates to exhaustion. Once the resource is exhausted, the economic activity that's dependent on the resource must collapse. And so what we have is this process that we're living in where we consume resources until they're exhausted, the resources collapse, the economic activity collapses, and we move on to the next resource. And that is a recipe for destroying the planet. So the way to reverse this is to recognize that environmental resources are a common resource to be preserved and shared for the future, that if you want, we are going to use them, there's no question about it, but we need to use it in a responsible way. And what I've proposed is the idea of using a system of, think of it like a bottle bill, where you pay a deposit to use resources, and then when the resources, the environmental resources are restored, you get the deposit back. And the advantage here is, when you see people discarding these water bottles because they don't want to carry it around for 5 cents, well, there are other people that are going around and picking up those bottles. So once a price has been established on restoring the environment, then you'll start to see a change in behavior, and all the energy and activity that we're putting into destroying the planet now begins to equilibrate and move to the other side, and starts to be put into the prospect of restoring the planet. And in this way, we can restore balance. So that's the idea. I've been trying to express this for years, so thank you very much, Paul, for the opportunity to talk about it.
It's our pleasure, our honor. Is there a way for people to reach out to you?
No.
Okay, how about if they reach out to me?
They can reach out to you, and you can
And I will reach out to
me.
you. Okay?
Beautiful.
That's a good thing. And then talking about good thing, what is good news then for you?
What is good news for me? Just sitting here and talking to you, Paul, has made my day.
Okay.